Welcome into the install with Greg Cosell of NFL Films, Holiday Week edition. Greg, I hope you had a fantastic holiday. I'm sure you've been still at the grind. The football does not stop just because everybody else's lives do.
You're right about that, Buck. You are 100% right.
Yeah, I was at the point contemplating my life decisions, Greg, when I was sitting at Christmas Eve watching the Titans lose to a Texans team that has one win on the season. It did make me think about some things that I
Well,
may
then
have
it's
done
good.
wrong in my
Then
life.
maybe it's good because it got you to be a little reflective, think about your life. See, so the Titans are doing well for you then because it got you to think about things.
I can reschedule my therapy for later on in the year. We're in business, baby.
There you go.
So let's talk about this, Greg, because I think the thing that people want to know most at this point in a season that, feels like they're sinking, obviously, but they can still get in somehow, some way. Malik, is there
Yeah.
anything from him that you see through 3 starts now that is encouraging as far as signs of progress?
Look, I can only be honest because it's an integrity credibility issue for me, someone who sits and watches tape. And I would say it's very limited at this moment. Now, I've been doing this a long time, Buck, as you know. Probably people watching this know. I was taught the quarterback position by people a lot smarter than I and have been able to inculcate a lot of different, philosophies, ideas, through over time, from talking to people and studying. And obviously, I really enjoy studying the quarterback position. So I am never one who will say after 3 or 4 starts that a quarterback is a bust or can't play, because I think that's unrealistic and that's unfair. But I think at this point in time, it is clear, and we'll get into a little more detail in a moment, but I think at this point in time, it is fair to say that he's really not ready to play at an NFL starting level, which again, does not mean that will never happen. This is just where we are now. And they're aware of that. You know that by what they do offensively. And they're telling you that. But there's other factors involved too. And before we get to the specifics of Malik, I will say this. The Titans right now have a very bad mix in their passing game. They've got a poor pass protecting O-line and a rookie quarterback who doesn't have a real way to compensate for that. He's not advanced enough in his skill set to be able to camouflage and compensate for that. So it makes the pass game very difficult. So I'll throw it back to you, and we can get into a little more specifics.
Well, yeah, because that's the thing. It's tough for people, and nobody's trying to make. Well, the internet probably wants to make an assessment about him right now, but nobody, I think, intelligent is trying to do that off 3 NFL starts when we all knew that it was going to be kind of a slow burn for him, no matter where he ended up landing in the NFL. And this situation where it looked pretty positive at the outset, he's got time to sit behind a starter. The team is kind of in flux, so they don't necessarily have to find out about him right away. There's going to be a little bit more time. And obviously everything changed, and he's out there. He's played in 8 games so far this season. So, the offensive line, I was watching some cut-ups today, Greg, of Dennis Daly is the person who gets the most heat here, understandably so.
And by the way, that is based on tape. That's fair. I mean,
Yes.
He's a major liability in one-on-one pass protection. The tape tells you that. That's been an issue all season. It showed up again versus the Texans on far too many snaps. So that is a definite problem. The only way to really try to handle that is in clear passing situations to help them. Yeah. And then that limits your passing game and makes it tougher on your quarterback. So there's no right. Well, I shouldn't say there's no right answer. Protection is always number one. So you have to do whatever you can to protect your quarterback, because if you can't protect your quarterback, you don't have a passing game at all.
Yeah. Long story short, I think that Daly, his inability or his recurring issues, it takes a lot of heat off NPF, who has not been particularly good in the last couple of weeks, Greg. Getting beat with inside moves in particular. It's something you see show up regularly the more that you watch, and it kind of speaks to the larger problem as you just mentioned.
So now when you have two tackles, and certainly Daly's been not as good. I mean, Petit Frere has at least, he's been better, but he's
Yeah.
had some struggles. Now you're in a situation where you have to help both tackles in passing situations. And when you have to do that, that really makes it difficult for a young quarterback who at this point in time is not really a timing anticipation player. So he can't compensate for that. So now, like I said, it's a really bad mix right now. So if you're going to send three out as primary receivers and there's seven in coverage, and your quarterback is not really a timing and anticipation quarterback, that really makes it difficult for your pass game.
So, and I'm glad that we've kind of set the table with all of these things, right? Because I think the question that most people want to know here is, okay, can the coaching staff do more for him? And we're not in the business on this podcast of second guessing coaching. But is there anything, given the circumstances, Greg, that you would like to see them do more of, understanding his limitations and their limitations as a roster?
I mean, all you can really, I don't want to say all, and I'm always a little leery of answering those kinds of questions.
Sure.
As you look, you're at the games. I'm watching on TV on Red Zone, so obviously I have my iPad open and I see people doing live tweeting. I'm not talking about Malik Willis, but just in general about the games. And I just love when I see people say, "Oh, poor game plan, play calls are bad." And I think to myself, these people have no idea what goes into putting together a game plan and trying to sequence plays based on the defense you're getting in that given situation, based on the players you have on offense, based on specific matchups that you may see as a problem. There's so many things that go into that you have to be there all week in the meetings to understand all the things that go into putting together a game plan and calling specific plays in a specific sequence. There's too many variables for me to make a truly intelligent comment about that. Now, having said that, are there basic route concepts that you try to run? Yes, and they do at times. You try to keep it basic for any young quarterback, not just for Malik Willis. You try to work the two-man side to the boundary because it's a two-man route. The coverage is less detailed and complex. You try to throw screens, which they did, and they weren't successful because the defense actually did a good job. So yes, there are things you can do, and the problem is when it's 3rd and 9, those things don't really work. Then you actually have to play. And they're in a situation now where very often in long yardage, depending on the game situation, and there was one game situation late where I believe they were on their own 21-yard line. I think it was 3rd and 10 with 6 minutes remaining, and they had a 1-point lead, and they were on their own 21-yard line. And you knew the coaching staff did not want to call a pass play. So they didn't want him dropping back and having to try to decipher things, because on 3rd and 10, you're not, you could throw a screen theoretically, but I mean, he's not ready for all that, so you're trying to help him, but there's certain situations where you can't help him. You've got to play.
Well, and this game in particular, given that it is 0 playoff implications for Tennessee, there are some for Dallas as they jockey for position.
Yeah, Dallas has to play. Dallas will be playing.
Right. And Tennessee, I don't know at this point, they've just sent us the final injury report, Greg. And it was always a question as to who they would rule out. But Jeff Simmons, Amani Hooker, Bud Dupree, Zach Cunningham, Christian Fulton, and Derrick Henry are doubtful. The rest of them are out. NPF is also out. So this is an entirely backup offensive line that they're about to toss up.
Right. Right. Against a really, really good defensive front, by the way, that can really get after the quarterback. So you're going to see LaRaven Clark, and you're still going to see Dennis Daly, and Nate Davis. Is he on IR?
IR, both him and Ben Jones.
Okay, so therefore you're still going to see Ruse, who had some real struggles with Malik Collins at times, particularly as the game progressed. So you're going to see this offensive line. And look, this is a game where you try to do your best to at least get Malik Willis some confidence, help him just get completions. That's all you're trying to do. you understand that if you get into long yardage, you're probably not going to ask him to do more than he and the O-line are capable of at this point. So, you recognize that going in, and fans should understand that if it's 3rd and 10, he's probably not going to stick a 22-yard dig route to Treylon Burks. That's probably not going to happen. So you hope maybe that he throws a screen to Haskins, and maybe you can get 12 yards and a first down. But I mean, that's the kinds of plays you're going to see when you get into long yardage.
That's ironic that you bring up, literally, I think Malik had a 22-yarder wiped off because of penalty, I believe, to Treylon Burks. I don't think it was a dig route, though.
Right.
And I can't remember the down and distance, but either way. So with this Dallas defense, Greg, Micah Parsons is obviously an otherworldly talent. What they have up front, we've talked about a little bit this season. We haven't done a ton of Cowboys around here, but their inability as of late, or their lack of success that they're accustomed to as of late to get to the quarterback, shouldn't be necessarily a problem this week. But is there something for them that teams are doing to kind of mitigate that pressure that we know that they can bring?
I mean, this past week they played a really, really good O-line, maybe
Right.
the best in the league. Gardner Minshew dropped back 41 times, was not sacked. I think that Parsons is a guy that is always a problem one-on-one. They've had some injuries along the defensive front as well. Some guys, Sam Williams, the rookie, who you're probably familiar with, having played in the SEC. He played at Ole Miss, and he was actually the only guy when I watched tape last year leading up to the draft that gave Charles Cross from Mississippi State problems. So Sam Williams was out last week. So, there's nothing I can think of one thing that says, hey, they're struggling. They still, I think, are 2nd or 3rd in the league in sacks. So they can get after the quarterback. Their issue has been the corner spot. And again, it may not be a factor in this game, the corner spot opposite Diggs. That's where they've had a real problem. And that's caused issues for them, over the last number of weeks. They're a team that does not play what we would call base defense unless they make a change this week, specifically for the Titans. What they play is they play big nickel as their base defense. And by that, I mean they play 3 safeties. So Jaron Kearse, who's 6'4", 220, is essentially a hybrid linebacker safety. And the other 2 safeties are Donovan Wilson and Malik Hooker. So they essentially play big nickel as their base defense.
So we'll see how, if they one would imagine they'd be able to get right against this particular Titans offensive line, even if it wasn't this particular Titans offensive line. This is not a great pass protection team.
Right.
Offensively, the 2 running backs, obviously Zeke is one of the at his peak has been one of the best running backs in the league. They have a great complement to him with Tony Pollard. The way that obviously CeeDee Lamb is an unbelievably special player. How they use those running backs, though, Greg, and how much of that kind of dictates their offense. What can you tell us about the way that Dallas deploys those 2 backs?
Well, I mean, they use them somewhat interchangeably. Pollard has actually shown an ability to run effectively inside. Earlier in the year, he was being used primarily as a guy they'd want to get on the edge, and they still do because he has far more explosive ability than Zeke at this point in Zeke's career. But they've also now run Pollard inside. He's actually tough running inside. Zeke at this point is a grinder. He does not have the same kind of ability to run, 18, 20, 22-yard runs that he did a number of years ago. So Pollard is their big play back. Believe it or not, Pollard, and I know Zeke missed a game, but Pollard has more first down runs than Zeke, which might surprise people. So Pollard, while he's not a true feature back in that you're going to see him get 22 or 23 carries, he, I think, is more of their, I don't want to say their number 1 back, but I think, he's the guy that gives them a lot more juice. You mentioned CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb is lines up almost 50% in the slot and 50% outside. In the slot is where he does his best work. He really is a slot receiver. That's his game. He's linear. He's long. He's got some run after catch ability. He's not a number 1 in a strict sense. He's not in the John Justin Jefferson mold. He's not that kind of receiver. He's their number one and gets the most volume, and he's good. Don't get me wrong. I wouldn't call CeeDee Lamb special. He's a really good, solid NFL wideout. Dalton Schultz is their tight end, although they've been working in Peyton Hendershot and Jake Ferguson, who I actually think has a lot more juice than Schultz and could end up being their guy down the road. But the other two wide receivers at this point, Gallup has not quite come back from the injuries he's had. And, Noah Brown he's their third. He's almost at times more of a blocker in the run game than a receiver.
I'm special should be reserved for the likes of Justin Jefferson. That guy is unbelievably talented at what it is that he does.
I mean, I wouldn't put Lamb in the Jefferson, Devontae Adams category. He's their number one, and he's good. And, you have to remember one thing. Most teams, I know it might not seem to be the case with the Titans because of the way they play, but most teams that throw, and we're in a throwing league, the number one receiver on that given team will put up numbers because teams throw so much. So the number one receiver gets 135 targets.
Yeah. I used to know what that was like, but not the last couple of seasons.
I mean, AJ Brown, when he was there, he was getting 1,000 yards and getting, volume and, targets, volume and catches. I mean,
for a Titans offense, passing volume has never been more of a real thing. That's as close as we got.
Right. So, the Cowboys are a good football team. I mean, their record says so. Dak Prescott is, again, I don't care what people say. I see the tape. He's a very professional quarterback. He's a really good player. You can watch the tape and see he clearly understands how to work through progressions. He knows where to go with the ball. I know he's thrown a few too many interceptions in the minds of many. I've always believed interceptions, Buck, you have to look at each one individually and can't just look at a number on a stat sheet and go, oh, that's too many. You have to see what they are, and some were his fault, some were not.
His ability, as you mentioned, progressions, just the ability to isolate and eliminate. Greg, he seems to do that as well as any quarterback in the NFL right now. Obviously, there are people reserved at a specific kind of class, but like Joe Burrow does this at a very high level. The ability to diagnose. Dak is. I'm not interested in doing comparisons necessarily, but Dak is really, really solid.
He's good at that. No, he can, and that's the term I've always used, eliminate what's not there and isolate where to go within the structure and timing of the play.
No, I promise I listen, Greg.
Right. And that's Dak is very, very good at that. And he's an aggressive thrower at times. So sometimes, look, I would say most offensive coaches would rather the quarterback be an aggressive thrower who, turns it loose than one who doesn't do that. And every once in a while, when you do that, you do throw a pick or you throw a bad ball. And obviously you hope as a quarterback plays with more and more experience that they do that less. But certain quarterbacks will do that. And because they can do more things than not very well, you live with that. You try to coach it, you work through it, but you don't act like, oh my God, this guy stinks, because he throws a pick or two here and there, and Dak is he can do all those things that you want your quarterback to do from a detailed, subtlety, nuanced perspective.
He'll certainly have the opportunity to do some damage on Thursday night without basically the Titans. Titans defense has been half in, half out anyway this year. But
I mean, really, in a game like this, and I'm just being honest, what you're hoping is that the Titans really compete hard and that the game can at least stay close. Maybe they can get some turnovers on the defensive side of the ball, and again, that's why they play the games. We've seen crazy things happen in the NFL, and I'm not going to sit here and say, gee, the Titans are going to win 35-10. That's not the point. They're going to be missing a lot of players that if this was, let's say, a playoff game would probably be active and playing, but they're not going to because it's not necessary. So now you hope that whoever they put out there, that they compete hard, and you'd like to see Willis. To me, this is a game. You don't want to break the kid, obviously, and I don't know Malik Willis, and I've heard really good things about him. You've probably had a chance to be around him, and I've heard really good things. So it's not that you're going to break the kid, but you'd like to see him have some success. And success does not have to be measured in going 20 for 30 for 300 yards. Success is just getting completions, getting a feel for where to go with the football, with the right kind of timing, maybe understanding progressions better based on what he's seeing from the defense. He's a little slow right now with understanding where to go with the football. that does not surprise me based on what his offense was in college, Buck. And he's played what is it, 3 NFL starts or 4 NFL starts?
This will be his fourth coming up.
Okay. So none of this is surprising. This should not be cause for alarm in the sense that, oh my God, this guy can't play. He needs reps at the NFL level.
He's going to get them.
And it's not going to be pretty at times, but he needs reps at the NFL level.
We'll certainly have him on Thursday night, and we'll see what happens for their play-in game against the Jags in Week 18.
So that's the case no matter what happens this weekend, correct?
Yes, it is the AFC South Championship game in Jacksonville, Greg.
Well, that means it'll be in the matchup show.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, it's going to be an interesting game one way or the other. We'll see what both of those two teams look like, and obviously we'll talk about that when we get there. But I'm glad you kind of framed the Malik Willis and really the Titans game that way, Greg, because that when you were talking about that, the competitiveness, can you keep it close? Can you find ways to make some plays, even if you don't necessarily come away with the win? Like that to me is what like the last month and a half of the Texans have been, because they've been playing more competitive football. Right. And, the results haven't necessarily been there win-loss wise, but there's no question that football team that I watched on Saturday was a better version than the one I saw in and
the 2 prior weeks they had played the Cowboys really tough. They should have won that game, and they had played the Chiefs really tough. They lost in overtime the week prior. So again, in the NFL, no coach is going to say, "Gee, it's a moral victory." No coach talks like that, But given the Titans this given week and who's not playing and who is playing, you just want to see them compete hard, be competitive. Hey, who knows? Maybe they have a chance to win in the fourth quarter. Maybe Dak Prescott throws a couple of picks. I guarantee in the defensive back meeting room all week. And who's their defensive back coach?
Here it is Anthony Midget.
Okay, I'm sure he's telling them that, hey, he's going to throw a few to you. We got to catch him. I'm sure he's telling him that. I've been fortunate enough in my career to be in defensive back meetings in camps, and they talk about that a lot. That, hey, they're going to throw it to you. We got to catch it. Maybe that happens. Maybe a turnover happens early, and all of a sudden they're up 10-0. You never know how a game plays out.
Oh, certainly we'll find out on Thursday night. The NFL Matchup Show. Set your DVRs. Catch it on ESPN Plus, of course. There are Saturday games this week, right, Greg?
You know what? That's a great question.
I said that. I'm like, is the schedule different this week? I couldn't remember. I'm going to double check for you here. No Sunday games.
There's no Saturday games. Yeah. There's
no Saturday games
I think the last weekend.
That's right, because we're still waiting on to see if Titans and Jags is going to be a Saturday.
This is actually you got Cincinnati Buffalo on Monday night this week. And while both teams are in the playoffs, they're fighting for seeding. And that is a really big game just in general because of, who's involved. You got, arguably 2 of the 3 best quarterbacks in the league. And if I'm missing someone, I don't want people to say, what about this guy? Let's put it this way. You got 2 really, really good quarterbacks playing in that game.
Don't worry. This is a sports talk radio safe space, Greg. You're good.
Right. We'll leave it at that. We'll leave it at that. Those teams are really good and both would be considered legitimate contenders to get to a Super Bowl.
Yeah, that it's so are you doing a package on that game?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's the ESPN game and it's a big game. And, then you have Minnesota and Green Bay. Even Steelers Ravens is an intriguing game.
Sure.
There's another game I'm missing. Jets Seattle, believe it or not, is a really big game.
No, those are all. There are competitive football games on the table this week because the Steelers. It's crazy that Mike Tomlin is 7-8,
and they still have a chance. And by the way, even though Tua is not playing this week for Miami, if New England wins their final 2 games, it's my understanding, and I don't study this in detail. I wait till I read about it, but I think they would have either they'd be in or their chance would be like 98% if New England were to win both games of getting in. So. That's New England, Miami becomes a really big game too.
This is all you can ask for. Maybe a little better football, but at least competitive, meaningful football at this time of year as we get ready to head in the final 2 weeks of the season. Greg, a pleasure as always. Enjoy the coming football, and we'll certainly talk about whatever happens on Thursday and whatever may happen next Saturday or Sunday when the Titans play the Jags.
All right, Buck, I appreciate it. Thanks.